What if WWE had never scrapped the King of the Ring pay-per-view? Starting in 1993, Bret Hart would go to win a single elimination tournament to be crowned King of the Ring. This tournament would continue each and every year as a pay-per-view, with the last one being in 2002. From 2003, the pay-per-view that took its place was Bad Blood, and well, we've not had a King of the Ring pay-per-view until, well, now in 2024, King and Queen of the Ring. Of course, it's been 22 long years since we've had the event. There have been kings in WWE since 1985, but of course not a King of the Ring pay-per-view. So the question is, we had kings like we say Bret Hart, Stone Cold Steve Austin, Triple H, Kurt Angle, Edge and more between 1993 and 2002. Who would have been king from 2003 up until the present day? WWE has done 6 King of the Ring tournaments sporadically throughout those years, pretty much once every couple of years, so those years have been decided. But this video, I'm going to fantasy book speculate who I think would have been King of the Ring starting in 2003, working the way through now to 2024. So make sure to like this video, share it with a friend, subscribe to the channel if you are new here, and get involved in the comments below as well who you think would be King of the Ring for that particular year. So we're going to start in 2003, and well, there was quite a few heavy hitters around that time period. Rob Van Dam, of course, being the runner-up the year before in 2002. You had the likes of John Cena emerging amongst the scene as well with his rapper gimmick. You had, well, people like Eddie Guerrero, who was massively over, becoming US champion and soon WWE champion, and Chris Benoit as well has been mentioned, of course, who would go on to main event WrestleMania 20. He won the Royal Rumble, so I'm going to take him out of the equation here. So he was actually given that platform to go for a world title. For me, looking at the other names mentioned, I think Eddie Guerrero would be the best suit. He lies, he cheats, he steals, and his gimmick was getting over massive to the point that Eddie couldn't be ignored anymore. He became WWE champion at No Way Out in 2004, defeating Brock Lesnar. So the fact he also became a world champion, I think he would have been someone that could have benefited not winning a Royal Rumble, although he won the SmackDown Royal Rumble in 2004. I think King of the Ring would have been beneficial in 2003 for Eddie Guerrero. Moving on to 2004, some big names again, once again, around that time period. A lot of names we've mentioned previously. I think Randy Orton would have been a perfect candidate to win in 2004, mainly because he was, well, the world champion come SummerSlam, and of course he was IC champion at WrestleMania. To just have that platform to, you know, win King of the Ring, to go and get the title opportunity to win at SummerSlam, just would have built him up that little bit more to get him in that position. If you look at Randy Orton afterwards, he was to be kicked out of Evolution the night afterwards, dropped the championship to Triple H about 3 or 4 weeks later, and pretty much had to rebuild himself, turning heel again after a babyface run a mere few months later. So Randy Orton kind of was a bit hurt after winning the world title. So at least if he'd won King of the Ring, maybe there might have been an opportunity where he could have, I don't know, held himself a little bit better and a little bit longer than he did in his babyface run. So 2005 was an interesting year in WWE. John Cena and Dave Bautista had won the world titles at WrestleMania. Randy Orton, of course, was being built as a heel again, feuding with The Undertaker throughout that summer, right through most of that year actually. Edge had won Money in the Bank, which is also a concept now we need to take in consideration when crowning a King of the Ring. So we looked then at some of the fresher faces that had come into the company. For example, Carlito, Caribbean Cool, Chris Masters, Bobby Lashley, Mr. Kennedy, I think had started all in and around this point. However, there was one controversial figure that was being pushed quite heavily in WWE, was undefeated as well, and with the King of the Ring being around in June, I think he would have won it. Muhammad Hassan. Who remembers Muhammad Hassan? Of course, he was cancelled in July. A booking decision, of course, to have a terrorist angle with The Undertaker on the same day of the tragic terrorist attacks in London, of course, on July the 7th of 2005, meant that the character of Muhammad Hassan was basically cancelled off of WWE, being squashed by The Undertaker at the, I believe, Great American Bash pay-per-view in 2005. But still, the fact that this happened at that point, I think a month earlier, if I'm being honest with myself, I think that is the person WWE would have gone with, because he had so much heat at the time. You know, these famous speeches that are done of every end of King of the Ring tournament, for example, Stone Cold Steve Austin, for example. You've seen the likes of, you know, Owen Hart screaming, "It's time for a change." You know, I just think for myself, Muhammad Hassan would have been given that platform, and I think it would have had a lot of mileage had they not done the angle that they did the following month. I think he could have been a big deal in WWE for many, many years. Of course, Booker T won the King of the Ring in 2006. We don't need to discuss that one. King Booker was arguably one of the greatest kings in WWE history and went on to become a world champion as well. So we'll move on to 2007, which again had a great talent pool available of options to win King of the Ring. Mr. Kennedy had one Money in the Bank, so I'm going to move him to the side. But you think of the likes of Umaga, for example, MVP, CM Punk was around, the ECW brand was going strong at that point. Jeff Hardy had broken to a big singles run as well, and we can't ignore the Great Khali was on a big push as well, would win the world title later that summer. For me, I'm torn between two. MVP would have been a good shout for me as United States champion. However, someone that would go onto the main event scene and become a world champion is Jeff Hardy. The King of Extreme has a nice ring to it, doesn't it? So I'm going to go and say that I think Jeff Hardy would have won the King of the Ring tournament in 2007. In 2008, WWE crowned a King of the Ring winner, William Regal, on a Monday Night Raw. Sadly, as a Brit, it didn't lead him to winning a World Championship, but hey, it was still fun to see Regal pushed heavily at that point in 2008. So we move on to 2009, where we saw the likes of Christian Cage return to the company, Kofi Kingston getting a push as well, but I think this could be a year that a more established superstar could have won King of the Ring. Someone that had never won it previously, but had freshened himself up in the gimmick in 2008 and just was on pretty much the roll of his career at this point. Chris Jericho, for me, would be my shout for King of the Ring in 2009 because, well, like I say, he was just having a phenomenal feud with Shawn Michaels the year previously. He'd done WrestleMania 25, where he'd taken on the Legends, had the Mickey Rourke stuff, so I just think he would have continued him in a top vein in 2009. Around this bit, I think he was feuding Rey Mysterio for the Intercontinental Championship, and Jericho was always a name that was in and around the world title picture for a number of years moving on after this. So yeah, Jericho will be my shout for King of the Ring 2009. In 2010, again, WWE did a King of the Ring tournament. King Sheamus was the pick at that point. I think was the right choice as well, looking back in hindsight, because Sheamus had been dominant, had only been in the company for a couple of months, had won the WWE Championship. So to move on to the King of the Ring, I think was sensible in 2010. Wearing the crown wouldn't have been my choice. You don't always need the King gimmick, but still, Sheamus, King of the Ring 2010 worked for me. We move on to 2011, and there's a few names that do stand out. Of course, The Miz had just come off being the champion, so perhaps King of the Ring could have worked for him. A great mouthpiece as well for a promo at the end. Alberto Del Rio, of course, was being heavily pushed, being brought in as well. I never really mentioned Rey Mysterio. He would be a contender in all of these years for King of the Ring, but I've not got him winning, unfortunately for him. Mark Henry, the Hall of Pain, seemed to be starting in the summer of 2011. He would go on to win a World Championship. However, again, not going to be my selection, but Mark Henry is my backup option here. I'm going to go for CM Punk because, of course, CM Punk around that time frame won himself a #1 contenders match, and we know what followed: a pipe bomb and Money in the Bank 2011, where he'd win the championship on the last day of his contract and escape the arena with the title. Imagine if Punk had won King of the Ring the month before and cut the pipe bomb there and then, saying I've got 30 days left, I'm not waiting till a SummerSlam, for example, which a lot of people used to get the title shots at SummerSlam. I'm going to do it in Chicago, Money in the Bank, because my contract expires then, and I'm leaving with the title. It just could have been done on a pay-per-view rather than a Raw. It's still one of the greatest moments in wrestling history, but I'm just saying, think of it under the King of the Ring aspect. Sounds like a lot of fun to me. Moving on to 2012, we could have the likes of Dolph Ziggler, for example, Cody Rhodes, Damian Sandow. Of course, NXT starting to become a thing as well, with people being using NXT in these series formats being brought up. Probably Wade Barrett would have won it before he'd actually become King of the Ring, which actually we will be talking about later in the video. But for me, my choice for 2012 would be Daniel Bryan, because Daniel Bryan, it's his kind of shtick, isn't it? King of the Ring, being the greatest and the best wrestler on the planet. It's a moniker that would suit him perfectly, especially in this time period where he had lost at WrestleMania the World Championship after 18 seconds. Of course, he won Money in the Bank in 2011. So to win King of the Ring in 2012 for me would be a perfect time frame, with him screaming yes and no and being so grumpy and mad, but actually taking out the fans and saying, you know, but he is the king after all. I think he would be fun with the king gimmick as well. I think going around in that goofy manner with the, you know, the scepter and the crown and stuff would have been a lot of fun for Daniel Bryan. So yeah, he would be my selection for 2012. 2013 was an interesting period in WWE. We're talking the likes of Jack Swagger being pushed into the world title scene. We're talking the likes of Alberto Del Rio getting another crack. Dolph Ziggler had been in and around. I think he would have been a good option, but unfortunately got a concussion not long after winning his world championship, and of course that sort of messed his booking up for that sort of summer. We did get the debut of Bray Wyatt later in the summer, but I'm still got King of the Ring in around that June period. So for me, I'm looking at an established superstar that's been in and around at that time period, and I think someone like The Miz would have probably benefited here. Like I say, he'd been a world champion about a year earlier, or just over a year earlier, and at this period he's probably looking to try and rebuild himself to try and still be in and around that main event scene. I think something like King of the Ring would have benefited The Miz a lot, and actually then as well to show that he's done something that Daniel Bryan has done as well. He could just say, like, I've taken the crown from Bryan. It just, their on and off feud would have worked perfectly as well forever with this. So yeah, I think The Miz would be my choice for 2013. 2014 King of the Ring. I mentioned the Wyatts already, but I'm just going to mention because they are the ones that I would be considering. It's the Shield, of course. Look, the Shield were a group that came in at 2012, the booked as the strongest trio in WWE. You get to 2014, and this is around the period of where they break up. Seth Rollins, of course, wins Money in the Bank, so I think King of the Ring, it's a bit early for him at this point. You're probably looking at Dean Ambrose, or the one that they want to push to the very top, Mr. Roman Reigns. At this point, Roman Reigns was not booed and not hated. He was seen as the powerhouse of the group and one expected to go to the top of the card. I think King of the Ring would have been perfect for Roman in 2014. However, his promo work was probably a bit weaker at that point, so I think we just would have seen a Believe That as your finishing speech for Roman as King of the Ring. Wade Barrett was crowned King of the Ring in 2015. Of course, I believe there was like a network special for when he was crowned as well, if I'm not mistaken. But of course, Barrett was to win King of the Ring. A fantastic time that he had that gimmick. It's a shame that Barrett never did go on to become a world champion. But moving on to 2016, and I think the King of the Ring would have been phenomenal. Yes, I'm not going to waste any time with other speculated names. AJ Styles came into the company at the Royal Rumble, and of course, what was going for championships as early as, well, the month after WrestleMania. I believe Extreme Rules may have been the name of the pay-per-view, and of course he would go on to become the world champion in 2016 at Backlash after the WWE draft. So for me personally, I think King of the Ring would have been perfect for AJ Styles to just put him into championship contention, just solidify him, have an early accolade before winning the WWE Championship against Ambrose in, I believe, was September time. So yeah, AJ Styles would be my pick for King of the Ring in 2016. In 2017, of course, a host of names have been called up from NXT at this point. You can pick your favorites in there, whether it's a Finn Balor, for example, whether it's, maybe an emerging Samoa Joe, of course, in 2017 would have been a great option as well. You look at the likes of Braun Strowman as well, was being pushed heavily around this time period. But I can't help but think that WWE went with an experiment in 2017. And that experiment was Jinder Mahal. Now, Jinder Mahal was someone that had returned to Raw in 2016 and was pretty much booked as an opening act, a curtain jerker, if you will, and he got traded to SmackDown in 2017 in the Superstar Shake-Up, and straight from there he went straight into championship contention. A King of the Ring would have done Jinder the world of good. Had he had won the King of the Ring to then go on to win the WWE Championship, I think fans would have found it a lot more believable in the run. It came from nothing. It almost became a bit of a laughingstock for the short-term early days of Jinder Mahal being the champion. Some never got over the idea of Jinder being the champion, and some learnt to accept it, and some learnt to really like it and actually thought he did a very good job as the WWE champion. His booking previously is what harmed him, so I think to have a middle bridge between that, ignore the 3&B days, you can actually have the King of the Ring tournament, I think would have done wonders for Jinder before winning the title. 2018 was another interesting year for WWE of who they could book for King of the Ring. Braun Strowman was on a big time roll at that point, was massively over with the crowd. Of course, he did go on to win the greatest Royal Rumble. I mentioned the likes of Samoa Joe and Finn Balor for the last year as well, but they're not going to beat my selections. And Dolph Ziggler was getting a renewed push around this time period as well. And I think not long after this, Drew McIntyre also returned to the main roster after spending a stint in NXT after being released from the company. But for me, my choice is going to be none other than Seth Rollins, because he was the workhorse mid-card champion in 2018. He was someone that had been in and around the main event scene for a long time, seemed to need to drop down the pecking order, work his way back up, get the fans on side again for when he can have a renewed push in 2019, which did succeed. He would go on to win the Royal Rumble in 2019 and win the championship from Brock Lesnar in the opener of WrestleMania 35. For me, if he'd won King of the Ring, I think that would have been a great accolade, something that Seth would not have done by this time period. Like I say, he'd won Money in the Bank the year that I think would have been suitable for Roman Reigns to win it. And you look with some of the other years, for example 2015, they give Barrett the accolade, and I think Seth was the champion at that time. 16, you know, Seth was stinting around the championship picture around that point, also been injured. So I think, you know, Seth, this would have been the right time period for him to win this right here. So for me, Seth would be my King of the Ring winner. That workhorse guy that can have great matches, you know, can do 2-3 matches a night as well. So he just would have fit his narrative and his character at that point. Of course, we don't have to worry about 2019. Baron Corbin was given the King of the Ring. Of course, it was on Raw and SmackDown. I think it was on the weekly television shows when it happened. And King Corbin was brought out of it, which I did actually think worked really, really well at the start. Ignore the dog feud with Roman Reigns at the start of 2020, but King Corbin worked for quite a time, and I thought it was actually not a bad gimmick for him. But we move on to 2020, and well, if we look at the King of the Ring, I think it starts to go later in the year at this point, because Corbin won King of the Ring around September time, so we're starting to move away from the summer period and starting to go into the fall, into the autumn. So at this point, it allows a couple more names to be brought into the situation. Someone like a Matt Riddle, for example. Keith Lee was brought in around this time period. Two people that heavily look to push early doors. You can look as well, it's pandemic wrestling, but if you bring it in around September time, a lot of the wrestlers that were not around during the pandemic had started to come back. You look at the likes, for example, Sami Zayn had started to come back. Roman Reigns came back, although he was becoming head of the table. We had The Fiend in the conversation, Braun Strowman. There were a lot of names that would have been very suitable for King of the Ring, but I can't help but someone's push in 2020 that was pushed so well, pushed him towards the title scene where it couldn't be ignored. He won the championship on the road to WrestleMania and defended the WWE Championship against Drew McIntyre in the opener of WrestleMania 37. Yes, you know who I'm talking about. Business is booming. Hurt Business member Bobby Lashley. I think Lashley would have been perfect for King of the Ring on multiple occasions. He had been in and around with the company, to be honest. He made his return in 2018, but this was the time that Bobby was booked at his strongest, at his best, with MVP by his side, and he was a main event player, and he was in and around that championship scene quite heavily. So for me, it would have been a great transition from United States champion to King of the Ring winner to then go on to become your world champion. So yeah, Bobby Lashley would be the pick for me. In 2021, we know at Crown Jewel, Xavier Woods, a lifelong dream for him, was crowned King of the Ring. Of course, the kingdom lasts for about a month after that, sadly. But Xavier Woods did get to fulfill that destiny. It was cool to see. Actually went to Survivor Series, which was the month after King of the Ring. So got to see King Woods representing SmackDown as well. Fun times. But we move on to 2022, and of course during this period, if you're thinking Crown Jewel, for example, this is a time where Triple H had taken the helm, Vince McMahon had left, and a lot of names were flying back into the company. Of course, one that was very heavily favoured at the time was Karrion Kross. He was going to be someone that was going to be targeting Roman Reigns, going for the bloodline, said he would take that championship tick-tock. King of the Ring would have been great for him, but he's not going to be my option because he was feuding with someone around that time period, Drew McIntyre, because Drew McIntyre is someone also who has been a previous world champion who had just lost a bit of steam. We mentioned the likes of Seth Rollins a few years earlier in this video. I think Drew McIntyre would have been perfect for King of the Ring because in WrestleMania 38 he took on Baron Corbin. Like I said, he was carrying Cross around this time period. If Drew had won this, it just propels him back into that title scene, and maybe we didn't have to wait so long for Drew to get back into the title picture that we see now in 2024. And the last option is 2023, and of course this originally was supposed supposed to be King and Queen of the Ring in 2023 before it was scrapped at the last minute, and of course it ended up being Night of Champions instead. Now, I do wonder if Jey Uso would have ever won King of the Ring, by the way, because it was main event Jey Uso. Jimmy was out for a long time as well. Maybe he could have won around the time period, although I think 2021 would have been the year. So Jey Uso, Jimmy Uso, they had the stuff going with the bloodline, so I ignore that for this time period. Obviously last year as well, Sami Zayn, KO as well, in and around with the bloodline stuff still as well, so we'll ignore them for the time period. But someone that was getting over like Grove with the crowd each and every time he would come out to the fans was LA Knight. Yeah, it's still a thing. People were waiting for his opportunity, his big push to come. It started around SummerSlam. What if we'd had King of the Ring that year and he would have won it? There was a chance Gunther would have been a good shout, probably would have won it last year had that been the case, but spoiler alert, this has been recorded in 2024, and of course it is the week of King of the Ring where Gunther is in the final of the tournament. I do believe he will be winning it, so yeah, I actually think Gunther is looked in for this year. If it wasn't LA Knight last year, potentially King Ricochet could have worked for me, but LA Knight feels like the right candidate because WWE were waiting for the right pinpoint moment to push it out, to find the right storyline, the right narrative, the right moments. Had they had King of the Ring, that could have been the perfect place, and we know the magic maestro that LA Knight is on the microphone as well. Just think about that King of the Ring speech. It would have been awesome, yeah, because you know whose game it is. And well, that's been the game of this video as well. So I've gone through King of the Ring, then winners potentially from 2003 to 2023, all in there. Well, of course, with WWE filling a few King of the Rings in the middle of that lineup. So let me know what you think in the comments below. Do you agree with my opinions? Do you disagree? Let me know, is King of the Ring, should it have stayed for the last 20 years, or is it bad that they've brought it back? Let me know. I'd be interested to interact with you in the comments below. And I will put the years as well and the pinned comment section, so that way you can take it, put it in the comments yourself, and you can actually fill in the gaps of who you would have as King of the Ring. But make sure to like this video if you've enjoyed it, share with a friend, subscribe as well, and check out my King of the Ring predictions, which are available on the channel as well. Thank you for watching. Look after yourselves. I'll see you for the next video. Have yourselves a great day.